Hi, everyone. My name is Sana Ahmed. I am the founder of the Product Marketing Institute. I've also created the Product Marketing Magazine, and this is a thought leadership publication in which I bring thought leaders from the tech space to be able to share their perspective of product marketing and how they have been using that to drive innovation and growth at their companies. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce my guest, Scott Brinker, who is joining us to be able to share his wisdom from his past and present experiences. Hi, Scott. Welcome.
Hi, great to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And for all the lucky viewers that are listening in, can you tell us a bit about yourself, what you've done in the past, what you're doing now?
Sure. So my career arc has largely followed what I would call the technology revolution in marketing. It wasn't more than a couple decades ago where like the worlds of IT and software and the worlds of marketing were largely two opposite ends of the spectrum in most businesses. And obviously the internet has just changed all of that. Marketing has become an incredibly digital profession. And as part of that, there's been just an explosion of software innovation in the marketing industry. So I was the co-founder and CTO of a marketing SaaS company, Ion Interactive. Created a platform for interactive content, grew that company, ultimately had it successfully acquired. Today, after that, I joined HubSpot, a leading MarTech platform, to be their VP of Platform Ecosystem, where my mission there is really to help other SaaS companies be able to integrate into the HubSpot platform and together be able to go to market, and be able to share a combined solution. 1+1 = 3.
Wonderful. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into that because I had a opportunity to connect with you beforehand. And we were talking about a few things, right? How important product marketing is especially in this sort of arena. And, how do you sort of come in as a glue, as a platform to convince people, what their benefit is? And then once they're able to join, how do you convince them that they will also remain differentiated, right? Because that's sort of the crux of, I would say, product marketing, right? If we were to define that first and then sort of understand how you sort of manifested that in your current role.
Yeah, it's a great lens to look at this. I think, you know, part of the beauty of product marketing is, finding that intersection of differentiating what your product is, and you're always looking for, axes of comparison where you do stand out from the alternatives. But I feel like even rooted more deeply at that is, are you able to solve a customer problem? Are you able to eliminate a pain point they have? Are you able to open up a new opportunity? And so one of the things that's been really fascinating in this explosion of technology in the marketing field is so one of my hobbies is actually tracking the different marketing technology tools out there, which I know is kind of a strange hobby, but it's incredible. There's like well over 8,000 tools, SaaS tools in the MarTech space. And on one hand, this should be a really great thing for marketers because they have all these specialized capabilities to choose from, all these companies who are competing with each other to win their business. At some level, you would think, wow, this should be the best of times for marketers. But it's challenging, and one of the reasons it has been so challenging is because a lot of these tools grew up independent of each other, and so marketers were kind of left in a situation where, yes, they could get these best of breed tools for certain activities or certain capabilities in their team, but it was kind of up to them to figure out, oh, well, how do we connect all these things together? And this is not what marketers want to do, right? I mean, we want to be reaching our customers, engaging our audience, doing a bunch of IT enterprise architecture. Not the best way to spend our time. And so I think what has happened here is, as marketers have expressed, listen, we love these tools, but if they don't work together, it's really hard for us to integrate them into our actual marketing operations. I think it's created a really interesting opportunity for product marketers who say, okay, we differentiate our capability by what we do and what we do better than anyone else. But one of the ways we make this so accessible for you is these other tools that you have in your MarTech stack. We can also integrate with them. In fact, actually, we might integrate with your favorite tool better than our competitor does. And that actually becomes an axis of differentiation.
That is music to my ears. I know that I was part of a marketing cloud earlier or middle of the last decade, because now we're in 2020, and that was one of the big things of you mentioned two big points. Like, one is that the marketplace with marketing technology, it's very saturated. So you have thousands and thousands of people, or companies, I should say, that are trying to sell a marketing communications, MarTech, Marcoms tech platform. And there's just so much to choose from that it's humanly impossible, right, to be able to go and try to evaluate each and every opportunity. And so the second thing you also mentioned that was important too, which is a lot of these earlier in the decade, last decade, and I would say even pre 2010, everything was about the internet felt a little bit smaller than it does now, and so everyone was coming out with very unique ways of being able to do things, and so there was a lot of point solutions, as you're saying. And when you create very specific point solutions, what happens is you can't be everything for everyone, and you have to pick your specialization and stick to that one thing, similar to what this whole philosophy of product marketing is, right? It's like, what is the problem you're solving for the customer? And digital technology really allows you to really hone in and focus on that. But then the problem with that ends up being is that, oh, there's a point solution that I'm doing for one thing, here's another point solution. And there's just so many options in the marketplace. So I really like what, the where you are and what you're doing with HubSpot Connect, where it's coming in and showing it's okay for you to be different. But if you do have a different need to be able to complete your tech stack, you're able to do it through our ecosystem. That's actually pretty ingenious, to come in with that angle, because then you're no longer necessarily competing with anybody. You're the person that's helping them continue to differentiate, which is a product marketing superpower
Yeah,
on
and I think one of the
steroids.
things one of the things we recognize is all integrations are not created equal. I mean, like at a high level, everyone says, "Oh, does your product integrate with X?" But in a cloud world where everything has an API, I mean, the answer is probably in some way yes. But the truth is, the degree of which products are integrated, like how much data are they sharing? Is it one way? Is it a two-way sync? Are these products working together in a common workflow? Is there elements of the UI that get shared between them? I mean, you can have a really weak integration and you can have a really strong and deep integration. And so it's interesting when product marketers are competing based on one of these axes of benefit by, oh, how well does this product work with the other tools in your stack? There's a lot of runway there to differentiate yourself. And so it's pretty exciting to, see products and product marketers focus on that dimension, because this really has been one of the big pain points for marketers in this crazy MarTech stack landscape they have.
That's just really great. Thank you for sharing that. I want to dig a little bit deeper, because we had some interesting an interesting conversation prior to this, and this was just talking, from a leadership perspective, because you've been in a lot of different C-suite roles. You've been CEO, CTO, you ran your own company, and now you're doing this platform ecosystem partnerships with HubSpot. Talk to me now, when you go from uh, someone that's in the trenches or an individual contributor at the product marketing level, now to all the way the C-suite level. How do you continue to think about product marketing? Does it change? Is it different? Is the way you sort of strategize and execute different? Are there people you're trying to inspire and sort of like guide in a certain direction? Like, I'm just curious about that because, in my opinion, in my business opinion of things, what I'm finding is that with this in this post-COVID world, we are in a situation where, again, we have to differentiate or die, and where if you don't quickly make that very clear and transparent, then it's sort of, it can very easily become like survival of the fittest sort of situation of, I'm going to use this vendor as opposed to that vendor. And so you have this sort of dynamic that, is sort of going on kind of in the background. And then for the people who are smart enough to, who are able to see like their point of differentiate in the marketplace differently at a leadership level, these are the people that are not being frightened at all, but they're getting excited, and now they're seeing like, okay, I have this influence as a leader over my organization, to be able to like influence to think in this direction and really continue to innovate and drive, right? Versus biting our fingernails and worried about what's around the corner and like, what can we do? So how do you do that as a leader? Because I don't think there's enough of a dialogue currently happening in the tech space at this leadership level to really like drill in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I admire about product marketing is it has two dimensions that really, I mean, when you step back and look at them at a large scale, are what pretty much any product company is about. And that's, on one dimension, this very analytical way of comparing across the landscape. It's the strategy map exercise of saying, okay, relative to the competitors or the alternatives in this field, these are all the different characteristics and dimensions, which matter to customers. Where are we strong? Where are we choosing to not differentiate, which is as important as where you choose to differentiate, and to be really exacting in that process, and very honest about being able to define, where the, strengths and differentiators are. But that is only half of it. The other half of it is the storytelling, the ability to really rise above those individual characteristics to be able to share a narrative that resonates with your audience, with your intended customer base, that they can relate to, that puts them in that position of being the hero of their story. And so as a product marketer, right? I mean, this is very specifically your mission, to build these things out. But to me, everyone in the company needs to be able to embrace that. They need to understand strategically, where are we seeking, to distinguish ourselves, what makes us different, functionally, from our competitors. But that story is what unites everyone for, what are we building? How are we telling that, tale to prospects? How do we serve customers, even once they buy it? I mean, they're then, looking to like live that dream that we have sold them. Is that story woven into how we look at customer success? So I think, yeah, that my sense would be product marketing as a philosophy, as a mission, as a set of skills is almost universal in a product company at this point, or should be.
You mentioned it being a universal sort of skill set or strategic way of thinking product marketing at companies. I still continue to see that companies are struggling with product marketing because, like, from seeing it from the inside and as well as from the outside, I think there's like several things that are going on. I think like internally, it's trying to round everyone up and getting them on the same page of what that is. And I think when you're in a technology company, that can sort of present its own challenges because everyone's moving so fast and agile in tech, and you're trying to drive all these innovations, and that itself sort of requires this art and science of sort of being the cowboy or cowgirl and hurting everyone and keeping them aligned. And then externally, it's that piece of what you're saying, which is how do we tell the story in the way that makes sense. And which when if I'm to walk into a Best Buy and I'm shopping for a flat screen TV, how do I know which brand I'm going to get and why? That's sort of like an example of the ability to be able to tell the story. And you mentioned it's like even after the point of sale, right? How do you continue to be able to talk to them and engage them that way? I'd love if we can like dive a little bit deeper, from you and your leadership perspective as a C-suite member, how you sort of did that, like whether you were sort of guiding a project or guiding a team to be able to like produce along those lines of being like super clear on the fronts of differentiation, technically speaking, but also like on a one-to-one human level, like how are we going to end up communicate that externally to the customers? I'd love to dig deeper there with you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think one of the stories that is imprinted very deeply in my memory is so the company that I had co-founded and run before I joined HubSpot, this interactive content SaaS company called Ion Interactive. When the company first launched its SaaS product in like the mid 2000s, it was essentially a landing page builder, which today you say those words and you're like, wow, that is a completely undifferentiated thing. But back in 2005, 2006, actually there weren't landing page builders like that. People had their big, gigantic, CMS engine. And for a large enterprise, anytime you wanted to change anything about your website and, what was running on your CMS, it required an act of Congress, to go through. And so marketers were just starting to experiment with the power of doing these lightweight campaigns that would drive people to pages on the web specific to that campaign, what became landing pages. And so from a business perspective, when we launched that, it was actually a very differentiated product. What we were differentiating against were traditional website CMSs. Now, as years went by, the whole digital marketing industry definitely got religion around, hey, yeah, wow, landing pages, these are great, we can use these, this becomes a whole part of the conversion optimization, culture. And eventually, pretty much every major cloud marketing product out there just included landing pages as a default capability. And so, over a period of 5 years, we went from an incredibly differentiated offering in the market to something that was about as commoditized as you could get. And so as a relatively small company, it was trying to look at how do we find a capability that is adjacent enough to where we have came from, that we can implement, like we can get there from here, we can get there quickly, and it would actually be meaningful to customers. It would help them solve a genuine problem they have. And what we ended up landing on was in some ways a really simple thing technically, but the success we had with it, I would credit entirely to like a product marketing strategy of how do you actually tell that story, which is landing pages were almost all exactly what they sound like. They were single pages. They sort of stood off on their own, and once you left the landing page, you went off to someplace else. And what we realized is there was an opportunity to not think of these so much as landing pages, but almost like little mini paths that someone would land somewhere, and then some of the choices they might make on that page, which could lead them to a next step, and then choices they might make after that, become almost like this interactive decision tree. In fact, this is where the phrase interactive content came from. Is it's not just about, oh, here's some content you're going to sit back and you're going to passively consume, but rather we as a marketer have created this tiny little mini experience that's designed to solicit your reactions, your input, and so these choices that people would go through, down these little paths were incredibly revealing. It was almost like having a discovery call with a salesperson, but instead of it being like, a human discovery call, it was this little automated marketing experience. And the technology for that was, again, not very sophisticated relative to where we had come from. I was simply thinking about how you connect these pages together into a path. But all of a sudden, that story of, okay, wow, this is actually something different. This isn't landing pages. This is interactive content. Here's how you use them. Here's the benefit you get. And frankly, a lot of the other companies who had commoditized landing page capabilities, the way they were designed was, it just wasn't going to be worth it for them to turn that into these multi-step paths. It just got too complicated in their environment. And so we were able to carve out a really differentiated capability in the market. And that's ultimately what led to the company being acquired.
That's so interesting. What you're talking about is, if we put these modern buzzwords or like marketing or product terms, essentially what you were doing back then, which is widely acknowledged now, is designing a customer journey, right? And understanding what those touch points were, and sort of like guiding the customers through each of those touch points, like based off of the tree. And that nowadays turns into other things, right? Like there's so many functions now that are part of what you were doing, like UX, UI design. It's what they call like the customer journey mapping exercises and things like that. So you were a bit ahead of your time before everyone was, categorizing it the way we are now. You were doing it back then, and you made a business out of it.
Yeah, and I think, the fact that, now a lot more people are doing things like that. Again, this is the ever-renewing challenge of being, in a SaaS business, being in product marketing is, you can win, but you can't rest on your laurels because, the very ways you like differentiate and win, people are going to look at it and they're going to chase it. So the sharks that need to keep swimming. If you get joy out of that, continuous push to evolve and innovate, it's a wonderful thing.
That I'm smiling that you say that, because that is something that is can sometimes be a pressure point, but also like a driving factor for me of in anything that I also do professionally and personally. It's like, how do I raise the bar? It's like if I'm competing with myself, like what did I do? What did I do yesterday, and what can I do today and tomorrow that will make it different, and also that I can sort of learn and grow out of it myself. And if you take that same mindset, wearing the product marketing hat in a business professional setting, whether you're a leader at the C-suite or someone that's a leader, a contributor that works for such a leader, it's trying to figure out how to do that sustainably and in a way that makes sense. Because I think the other trick here too, and I would love your feedback on this, is there's so many ways to also innovate and keep pushing yourself forward, right? It's like once you get over the, oh my gosh, the sharks are there and there's a lot of copycatting going on, then you get to the point of like, okay, I got over that, emotionally, intellectually, even physically, not being tired about going through that marathon. But then how do you keep yourself focused, right? Where it's like you have only a selected budgeted amount of time, money, people power. So now you're in this mindset of like, I'm ready to just keep innovating. Let the copycatters keep coming. Let them take that old idea that I had. I'm, going, moving ahead, pushing forward, making that rocket ship go from Earth to Mars and wherever that next planet will be going forward. But then how do you keep everyone focused, right? And how do you make the decision of what that next thing will be? I think is a fascinating thing for a leader, right?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things I feel I've learned a lot from the team and the culture at HubSpot. Is because I think it before HubSpot, my view of the competitive landscape was a very prominent part of how I was strategizing what we were doing and how we were going to market. And I think one of the things about HubSpot that is really fascinating and works really well is it's not that they ignore the competitive landscape, but it sits much lower in the hierarchy than really understanding the customer. Just like, what is it our customers want? What is the pain points? When we solve the challenges that they're having and they're happy, this is wonderful. But then how do we keep our ear to the ground for, like, okay, what's, their businesses are continuing to evolve, what are going to be the next set of challenges they face? And I feel like that customer centricity, it lends a beautiful focus to this, because you avoid the what can be tempting to have these like knee-jerk reactions, to competitive folks, whether they're trying to follow you or disrupt you or whatnot, and say, like, yeah, if we could get really clear about making customers happy and telling a story that we know is going to resonate with customers, that is that's the top of the hierarchy, and that's where everyone gets their focus. And it's a very positive feedback loop too, because like when you're going tit for tat with competitors, there is inherently a negative dimension to, hey, you're trying to beat me, I'm trying to beat you, versus when it's more focused on the customers, yeah, it's purely a positive loop. Like, oh, thank you, this is awesome. And could you do? Oh, yes, we'd love to be. It just that kind of energy just is much more sustainable. And then I think again, the competitive landscape is a part of reality, and it's a part of what in product marketing you certainly have to be able to navigate and position yourself with, but not letting it dominate your thinking or your strategy. I don't know. That's the lesson I've taken from HubSpot. I think they have been very successful at embedding that as their focal point in the culture.
I really appreciate what you're sharing. I'm just kind of smiling all over because it's really this ability of when you start becoming more strategic, right? This is something that I enjoy about product marketing, is that it demands strategy first before getting tactical and then executing. How do you go from being in this reactive mode of oh my gosh, there's all these existential threats around me, to then how do you really distill down into your inner essence for the brand and what it's doing for the customer? And the answer always maps back to the customer. So the better you can know them, the better you can continue to build a relationship with them, the better leadership decisions you end up making, right, across the organization, and also for those teams that are helping to sort of drive the overall vision with these leaders in these companies, and for the customer. So that's such an exciting point just to hear out loud, is that we seem to know all this stuff, but I think uh, so much sort of gets lost in our head, and we just have to remind ourselves of what is and what we're going towards, not the irrational mind or the irrational emotions that sort of want to kind of creep up on us.
Yeah, if you've got a bit of a competitive personality, yeah, it's just very easy to let competitors trigger reactions in you. But yeah, it is a bit of a red herring in quite a few cases. So it's a good product marketing discipline to be able to keep that in its place and really keep the customer at the top of your hierarchy.
I feel like this is sort of like a good meditative point for anyone to sort of take in, like take like a few minutes in the morning, visualize what it is you want, acknowledge all of these fears that you might have for the brand, but always know what that purpose is and how you're connecting your company's purpose with the purpose of the customer, and you'll always sort of you'll have your guardrails to stay on the right path. So that's such a good little golden nugget. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Is there any other perspectives you'd love to be able to share with the audience? Like any other things that you feel like in terms of the trends of product marketing, again, as from your C-suite point of view, where we sort of understand what product marketing's function is now, how it's helping companies sort of survive in some ways and hopefully be able to help them thrive. But where do you see product marketing going into for the future? Like, how do you see product marketing being done in a way that will continue to drive innovation, growth, success for companies? Like, what does that look like, from any sort of perspective that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things that's been very exciting in the marketing profession overall, yeah, product marketing is a part of that, is this expansion of the scope of what most companies now consider marketing to be responsible for. Like, I mean, again, for many years, marketing was almost this like ancillary function to one side of like, okay, well, now we've got the product, and yeah, we've got the sales team who actually do the sales, and could the marketing team, could they come up with some nice brochures for us? Since these past couple decades, though, marketing has really truly lived up to the vision of being the champion of the customer and looking at the opportunity to differentiate on customer experience across their entire journey. Like, how do they discover us? When they start discovering us and they're trying to get information about our solution, how easy is it for them to get that? How transparent are we in that? Is it something that we're giving them the mechanisms to self-service as many of these answers as they want? Are we making it easy for them to onboard to conversations with human beings when that's what they want? Once they actually decide to buy something from us, what is that? What is the process of actually doing the buying like? How delightful is that? What is the onboarding like? It's like this broader customer experience view of having the marketing team really champion that end-to-end customer experience. I think that's amazing. This is transformed the field of marketing from being on the edge of the organization to being at the very center of organizations who embrace this. And I think that's a really incredible thing for product marketing too, because it now expands our lens. We're realizing, okay, well, it's not just that we're competing on these feature dimensions or this pricing axis or something like this, but that whole journey and that whole experience becomes a dimension by which we can differentiate from the competitive landscape. And I think this is, I think as a profession, actually, we're still very early in this transformation. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of discovery and learning and experimentation happening now to get our arms around what's possible in that sort of environment. So I genuinely believe there has never, it has never been a more exciting time to be in the field of marketing.
I appreciate all of what you're saying, and I want to expand on some of those things. One thing that I picked up from what you were saying is that because marketing is evolving so much, it's like it's as if you look at a company as, let's say, it's just look at a company or a brand as one human being, and when you look at all the different departments inside the company, it's like it's pieces of that human being. And what I'm finding in tech, in the 15 years that I've worked in tech, from product marketing and now product management, is the ability to bring all parts of yourself, and really be able to give 100% that way. And what I'm finding is, companies are starting to understand that silos don't work. They're too costly, too expensive, and it doesn't make sense for companies to departments to go off in one-offs and do their own things, right? Like where maybe 20 years ago, pre-digital marketing, we suffered from siloed marketing campaigns. And now the very term marketing campaign to me doesn't exist the way it did then as it does now. Whereas a product marketer, I'm seeing how you have to bring all the product department teams together. You have to bring the marketing teams together, sales, client services, business strategy, the leadership team. And it's like, what is that vision that leadership is thinking? What is the vision for the customer? What do the customers want? What can the technology allow us to do, or what can we build it towards? And and then how do we make sure that we all have that understanding from a business side, that we're able to be able to do this in a very holistic perspective, instead of going off in like one way, client services going off in one way, sales selling it in a different way, business strategy completely selling it a different way. Like, granted, every department has their specific goals, but again, the less siloed and the more interconnected these departments end up being, then you're able to deliver this comprehensive and complete customer journey that makes sense for the customer, that's sustainable, that's scalable, in which the story makes sense, right? You mentioned things like narratives and really being able to get the narrative right. If you speak to me as a customer only through marketing blitz campaigns, it's not going to make sense to me, right? It's just like a fleeting thought. But if you come to me and you understand what all my customer journey points end up being, and you end up aligning the product narrative in the way against each of those customer journey points, you're pretty much going to have me as a customer that will end up converting and will also end up coming back. So it's very exciting times, as you're saying, because now we're seeing, as we're bringing all the technology to the human side of things and the humans to the technology in this digital transformation era, how all of this works, and how do we drive revenue, how do we drive the awareness and the adoption, the retention, the growth around these things. And I see this as a product marketer, as a product manager, as a gradual transition. When you truly connect with the customers in the right way, then everything else is just so much easier to do once you truly know the customer, right? And everything else just sort of falls into place, because I think now companies are slowly starting to understand this very integrated approach of how do we get everyone on board versus product, you go build this, and marketing, you go sell that, and sales, go try to figure it out on your own. That's no longer the case or the formula that works anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and it certainly it raises the bar for the skills that a successful product marketer really needs to bring to bear. Because it's not just the analysis, it's not just the storytelling, it's the organizational dynamics. And yeah, as you've expanded the scope of how you think of the influence of product marketing across all these touch points for the end-to-end customer journey. On one hand, yes, absolutely incredible and exciting, and so much opportunity to differentiate. But yeah, now it's the organizational adventure of orchestrating, and aligning so many different teams with so many different facets to their work. Yeah, it is definitely real art, and I see product marketers who are incredibly adept at it, and yeah, I hold them in awe.
I want to dig in a little bit deeper with you on the skill set front. I am on your LinkedIn profile. I love that your background that you have, going from having various computer science degrees, and then having being able to use that, turn that into products and companies, and fast forward into the present setting, where now you're able to help companies at scale, right? Excuse me, from a partnerships perspective. To you as a leader, having this engineering background, having the experience as an entrepreneur, understanding the product building perspective, and also having the marketing skill sets as well, what to you are the most invaluable skills that you think marketers need? Let's break that down from someone who's held various roles like yourself, and in the C-suite, and who has an illustrious educational background as well in computer science too.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a book, or kind of an interactive quiz book, from years ago called Strength Finders.
Oh,
But
I love that book. I actually took it a few times. But yeah, that's a very good book, and thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the takeaways I had from that is there is actually an incredible variety of talents and strengths out there. And that it's not so much that for any given mission or task, like, oh, well, you really need these two strengths, or just, give it up. It's more of like, wow, okay, everyone brings some different subset of that as really, their core talents, the places where they feel the strongest in what they can do. And I think it's largely about harnessing those strengths in your particular product marketing opportunity. Because I mean, the truth is product marketing is such an incredibly diverse set of, when we're talking about, right, how it's now connecting across the entire organization, and its go to market. It's such a diverse set of skills that are needed there. So some people are going to be really good at identifying the patterns of, from a strategic perspective, where this fits in a crowded landscape. Others are going to be particularly good at the storytelling of how do you take these elements and weave them into a narrative that genuinely moves your audience. All the moving pieces that need to happen in order to execute these things at scale. People bring the discipline, just even from a project management perspective, is so valuable. But then, yeah, that ability to teach and have the empathy with these very different teams to be able to create alignment across them towards that common vision of, yeah, what the product is trying to bring at a grand scale, to the market. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm sure there are superstars out there who are just phenomenal at all of those things. But I kind of believe that, actually, you could probably have product marketers that are very successful, as long as they're able to be capable at all of those things. But there's one or two of the dimensions that they're really, really good at, and they just lean into that as like the center of gravity around which then the other dimensions that they bring to their work, is really able to sort of have that orbit around that strength.
So key takeaways are for everyone that's listening, definitely read the Strength Finders book. And it has a really neat quiz at the end of it, as Scott was mentioning, and you can sort of see what your top 5 strengths are. And if little a tidbit there, if you actually take it a few years later, those strengths might end up changing, and that's something I learned about myself when I took it again. I was just like, oh, so we do learn and we grow and we expand. I think I agree with everything that you say. From my perspective, what I've learned as a having being a person with a non-technical background and a non-technical degree. I always was just so fascinated by technology, and I knew that I wanted to play some role in it. And for me, I don't see myself maybe into the future either necessarily sitting down and being the engineer that's necessarily building these things. I do see myself more as like the conduit um, between each of these departments, which is why I love such a cross-functioning role like product marketing. I think in a lot of great things you mentioned, looking back at my 15 years, I see that there was an immense level of creativity I had in terms of how to look at things and try to solve a problem. But what would enhance that creativity and make it more effective is sort of having a mindset of an engineer too, right? So for every one idea that you have, there has to be a set of engineers that have to build the train tracks, if you will, to be able to execute out on that idea. And so, and you know this probably better than I do with your computer engineering background, is it's like if you come to the table with an idea, it's like, how is it sustainable and scalable, and then being able to look at that from the technical aspect. And what you were saying too is, how do you relate to those cross teams to be able to communicate them in a way, communicate with them in a way to be able to sort of understand, okay, what is it that we're trying to do, and is this possible? What I found that has been most effective is, for me, again, as a non-technical a professional coming in and now having to interface with these developers and these engineers, I'm not gonna in that moment match their four-year degree or their 2-year master's degree in computer science. But what I can do is understand the product development cycle. And I think that that's also something that's overlooked a bit.
Mm,
And what that translates to me as, okay, how are we developing? It's the product agile development. What are all the stages of the product development? And what are the steps, what are my action items in each of those areas, and how can I step in and how can I sort of contribute, where as a product marketer it's not at the very end it's like you have this finished product, here you go market it. Product marketing is very involved throughout this entire product development cycle as well, from the early on of understanding the customer, scoping that product and the problem. It should ideally be from the very beginning to the end. Whereas I think the problem we're kind of facing right now across some technology companies is it being sort of like this endpoint where what I've seen as product marketing kind of gets hired if you're in a startup like Series C or D. And there's all this development that happened early on in which there was no product marketer that was assisting the product development team whatsoever in the ability to be able to develop. And so to me, that's how I want to sort of change that dialogue in product marketing into the future of, if you want to do it well, and the companies that are going to survive and do well are the ones who understand the customers from day one, right? Not like year 3 or year 4, but it's like, what were you doing from day one in terms of your ability to product market, research the customers, be able to understand all of their pain points, map all of that out, so that whatever product you're building and iterating on is a product that's aligned to the customer from day one, not somewhere hopefully down the line. Because inferring and hoping like that when you're dealing with so many product development and all this work that goes into it, hoping is not a strategy that works, but really being able to plan early on. I don't know if you agree with all of that, but I strongly believe that is one way that companies are going to be able to differentiate into the future, is really be able to embrace agile marketing and agile like product marketing as a way to help product marketers keep up with everything that's going on the product side, so that they can iterate and be nimble as fast as the way the product is being developed as well.
yeah, I think you make a really good point about embedding product marketing more deeply, but also in like, yeah, not a point in the journey, but really an iterative part, of the entire, ongoing process. And it reminds me a bit of the revolution that has happened in UX, over these past 10 years as well, too. I mean, it wasn't, like 10, 20 years ago, there just frankly wasn't a lot of UX leadership embedded in a lot of these product companies. People would build what they wanted to build, and yeah, frankly, the UX kind of sucked on a lot of them, and particularly over the past 10 years, it feels like, the industry has largely gotten religion around, wait, great UX is a huge differentiator. I mean, like, this impacts people not just buying our products, but not churning, retaining, and even better, like, actually getting success out of that. And to me, there's definitely parallels to that with, product marketing, because again, it's really about recognizing that this understanding the customer and understanding that narrative and building the product entwined with that, it makes it more human. And yeah, the irony perhaps of all this amazing digital innovation is we realize, perhaps the best way one wins in this digital environment is by being the most human.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just, it was never meant to be where technology was replacing the human experience, but it's like, how can technology help to enhance that human experience, right? Even when we sort of tangent off into things like AI and automation, and there's sort of like this fear around all of these things where it's like, what's going to happen? You know, all the human jobs are being taken over. But if you really look at, you know, a lot of the good technologies that are serving humans, or you know, human or person facing to a degree, it's not supposed to be able to detract, but be able to enhance, where it's like, you're taking away a lot of my busy work, and now I'm able to really be able to focus on other things, like, you know, more strategic thinking versus being a little bit more laborious and things like that. So yeah, thank you for that magic word of human, and really being human centric. um, I'd love to sort of ask if you have any other perspectives or closing thoughts that you'd love to be able to share with the audience.
You know, I think the miracle of this environment we're in right now, above anything else, you know, from a marketer's perspective, is how the malleable nature of digital makes it so easy for us to experiment, and we can just lean into that so deeply. You know, we are moving beyond the age of just pure intuition, you know, marketing, the one where, yeah, you know, we can really turn our intuition into hypotheses and run tests. We can run them quickly, we can run them inexpensively, we can learn from them, we can iterate from them. And Yeah, I think if there's sort of one superpower that like all of us in marketing can be taking advantage of with the wonderful world that is MarTech, it's that harnessing the power of experimentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And for anyone that wants to follow you online, follow any of your work, any of the amazing work that you're currently doing as well, how can they do that? Where can they go?
Yeah, well, I write a blog on marketing technology that is chiefmartech.com, but that is Martech without an H at the end, so it's TEC.com.
Hmm.
And then, as it happens, that is also my ID on Twitter at Chief Martech. So yeah, would be delighted to chat with yeah, anyone who is interested in these topics.
Definitely. And I'll make sure that I include that in the description as well, for our followers. But thank you again for joining us. And I look forward to following your work. And thanks for all that wisdom. Hopefully, anyone that listens in can be a better product marketer or leader as a result as well.
Well, thanks again for having me.